Hello, and welcome to the Over and Back Classic NBA podcast. I am Jason, and with me, as usual, is Rich. Hello, Rich.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing great. Excited for some good times this playoffs. It's been, if nothing else, we've seen some awesome LeBron James performances, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But yeah, things are good. How about you?
It's good. Yeah, I've been enjoying the playoffs a lot. First round was incredible. That was one of my favorite first rounds ever. It just seemed like there was a lot of chaos going on.
Yeah.
Things kind of settled in the semifinals, but these finals have been pretty nuts as well. We're recording this on Sunday the 20th, and yeah, it's been a little back and forth. Cleveland's back in the series. It's been fun. It's been it's interesting. It's really firing up for a real good a real good conference finals, and then obviously a real good NBA finals. So it's playoff time. Like it's pizza. It's like, has there ever been a truly bad NBA playoffs? Like ever where you're like, oh, that playoff stunk. Like there's always something good in there.
Yeah, there's always something that you enjoy. Like I said, it's a good point. Like even when it's not the best basketball, it's still basketball, still the NBA. So it's it would have to get to some pretty horrid depths for me to not enjoy it, at least in some level. But yeah,
even last year when Golden State was kind of buzzsawing through everybody, that was still fun. It was like, oh, okay, well, Golden State might not ever lose.
Yeah,
so that's going to be fun. Let's watch that. So it's always good. I mean, the only one maybe with a lone exception is like there was that one Spurs run, I think maybe 2005, where they just won every game like 73-68 or something like that. Yeah. And that was like, but even then, that was like they were close games. They were just very very
not the best basketball ever, but yes. So
no.
We're going to delve into some good and some bad in LeBron James's career. Some of his best games of his playoffs career, some of his worst games. We're going to go by Basketball Reference's game score metric in our list, although we're going to talk about some other famous and infamous ones as well. But yeah, that'll be a fun topic. There were ones that obviously were pretty easily remembered here that were among the most memorable games in his career that are, you see highlights all the time. They're talked about quite a bit, but there was some that like I'd kind of just forgotten about, like that were a little bit out of the blue, so to speak. And so it was a nice little jog down memory lane.
Yeah, and of course we're doing the bad games as well, and obviously we always do that. I think a few years ago we did like the Michael Jordan's worst playoff games or worst games thing or whatever. We always enjoy that too because it's a fun little look. And one of the conclusions you're going to come to, similar to what we did in the Jordan's worst games one, is that LeBron doesn't have a whole lot of bad games, so they really stick out the ones that are really bad. And even then, like some of the worst ones and ones that are kind of historically regarded as like his worst games or the biggest playoff chokes or whatever, he still the game score is still pretty good, and like he still obviously is contributing on many levels of the game, even if it is a pretty bad performance for him relative. But like, some is like one game is like he's got 9.7 rebounds and 8 assists, and it's like, oh, he's stunk.
Yeah,
like,
it's like a Jason Kidd game,
so. That's like a normal Draymond Green game, and it's like awesome. Like Draymond Green's great, but it's just like the expectations obviously for a guy like a LeBron is that like a near triple double is just not going to do it, buddy.
Right.
It's not nearly good enough. So it's kind of fun to look at that as well. So we look at the best, we look at the worst, and we look at also some comparisons of where he ranks playoff wise. Among other all-time great players too. So
yeah, absolutely. So we'll start with the best games. The first one is from 2009, May 20th. It is Game 1 in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Cavs battling the Magic. And LeBron, 49 points on 7-12 true shooting percentage, 6 rebounds, 8 assists, 3 blocks, only 2 turnovers. And this actually came in a loss, though. It was 107 to 106. Rashard Lewis actually made a three-pointer to seal the game. This was Cleveland's first loss of the playoffs in that year after they swept the earlier 2 series, and only their third loss in 46 home games that season. So that's obviously pretty incredible. At the end, Cleveland failed to score on some shots by Delonte West and Mo Williams. LeBron James, that infamous supporting cast that he had in 2009.
That team was so good too, and like everybody else just stunk. Like right there, you said key shots by Delonte West and Mo Williams. But yeah, that team was a dynamo, man. I mean, that team was having a lot of fun, and that felt like and particularly in this series was like the last little gasp of air for the Cleveland. And obviously they come back the next year. We'll talk about that next year, and they were still very good the next year.
Yeah.
But this was like, oh my god, these guys are awesome. They're having fun. They're just cruising up and down the court. Like this was the year for Cleveland Cavaliers. And then they met Hedo Turkoglu and Rashard Lewis and all the Dwight Howard and these Magic. But and this was one of those games too that I remember. I mean, LeBron was as good as you can be. I mean, literally his best game, and they still lost. It was like he gave one of his best efforts ever, and it was just still not enough. And it really kind of was a preview for what was going to come in the series.
Yeah, I feel like those early Cavs, like they actually by this point they were they had built a really good team of role players around LeBron that were pretty like complimentary for what he should be doing. They actually had some shooting. They had Verjao doing the dirty work, stuff like that. They actually had built a fairly smart team around LeBron, but it was still a bunch of role players around LeBron. And when everyone in the playoffs, when everyone's keying around LeBron, the other guys just, weren't quite good enough to deliver. And they were very close in certain situations. I mean, this Magic series went only 6 games, but, it was a relatively close series for the most part. It wasn't like they were that far off from, making the finals or winning a championship. It was just, it was like one of those things where, it was like actually a smartly constructed team. It just like the talent wasn't quite good enough around him.
Yeah, if you look at the juxtaposition of this team and like you're saying, that sort of era to what we have today, I mean, this team was filled with like 3-point shooters too, which is kind of weird in this era where it wasn't as dependent. But you had a guy like a Damon Jones who would just, his only job was sit in the corner, and when LeBron gets double and triple teamed, I'm going to pass it out to Damon Jones or whatever. But that becomes an issue in the playoffs when you're relying on your Damon Joneses, your Delonte West, your Mo Williams, and that sort of things. But it was a really like you said, a very well constructed team, a team that seemed like they had everything going and it constructed itself pretty well around LeBron. It wasn't, they're just a really interesting team, and I really wish they would have made an NBA Finals just to kind of see how they would have fared and see how historically things would have went for LeBron in that first run in Cleveland. But I mean, this one really fun team, really good team, but just ultimately the Magic were just better.
Right. Yes. Dwight Howard had 30 and 13 in this game. And in fact, he had a very thunderous slam dunk that caused the shot clock to fall backwards. And Hida Turkoglu had 15 points and 14 assists. I can't imagine Turkoglu passing that much, but I guess he was feeling it that day. And
I guess when the ball gets ripped out of your hands and someone picks it up, I guess they sometimes start calling those just assists.
Yeah.
that seems the only logical way that Hida Turkoglu had 14 assists. No, he was amazing in that series. I don't know.
He was really good. Yeah.
It was ridiculous.
Lewis was really good too. Yeah. I mean,
I think Rashard Lewis missed like one shot the entire series.
Right.
It's some ridiculous number. We at one point have looked it up. I think one time we did a run of numbers, the Magic in this series, and it was like Michael Pietrus had shot like 95% from the field. It was just unbelievable, the Magic's performance this entire series.
Absolutely. So so Cleveland, of course, as we this is not the game where LeBron, of course, since they lost, it was not the game where he had the famous game-winning 3. That was game 2 of the series. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But after Cleveland salvaged a split at home, the Magic won game 3 and 4 in Orlando. Game 4 was only won by 2 points. Then Cleveland won game 5 by 10 at home, but then lost in game 6 in Orlando by 13 points. Dwight had 40 and 14 in that game. People remembering Dwight Howard coming up in big games. It was a long time ago, but he used to do that. And like I said, Magic surprised a lot of people by winning the series. And though in retrospect, it was kind of demonstrated, as we talked about, that despite having 66 wins, the Cavs didn't really have much reliable in the playoffs beyond LeBron. And the Magic were ahead of the curve in terms of having a pace and space style that was really going to take over the league. Obviously, the Suns had already certainly played that way, but it was evolving even beyond that.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, this Orlando team had a lot of length too, almost similar to what today's Golden State Warriors, and that kind of what everybody's going for, like everybody be 6'8" type thing.
Right.
And that's sort of, I mean, you had like Hida Turkoglu playing like shooting guard, and so you know what I mean.
Sure.
Like it was a very well balanced team. Obviously, they still had some true positions in terms of Dwight Howard, feeding him down low or whatnot. But he at that point was still really good at doing kind of the pick and roll, and then he later started to not only want to get the ball in the block, and that's kind of, and then obviously became a turd that nobody likes now, which is kind of the Dwight Howard thing. But people liked him at this time, and he was very good at this time. But no, he was an awesome rim protector, awesome at the pick and roll, and they just had a team of shooters, a team of quick guys that could get up and down the court, and guys that could guard almost every position as well. I mean, there was a lot of dudes that could guard almost any position on the floor as well. So it just it is a team that was a little bit of a peek into the future of what would kind of become pretty prominent in the NBA.
So 11 days earlier, in Game 3 against the Hawks in the Eastern Conference second round, LeBron had what is considered his second best playoff performance according to game score. 47 points on 733 true shooting percentage, 12 rebounds, 8 assists, just 1 turnover. This was in a 67-82 win, and it was the Cavs' 7th straight playoff double-digit win, which set a playoff record, and that would extend to 8 in the next game, as it was a 4-game sweep, and the Cavs won that game by 10 points. So, and after the game, LeBron said that there's only a few guys in this league that can get into a zone like that, and I'm blessed to have the ability to be one of those guys. You just feel like you can make pretty much every shot you take. In fact, he normally rested during in a few minutes early in the fourth quarter, but he actually asked to stay in the game heading into the final period and Coach Mike Brown was not about to disagree, and he just kept making shots. And there was also a overzealous Atlanta fan near the court who kept jawing, and I promise it wasn't me, who was jawing with...
I was going to say, that was my next question is, Jason, do you have something to tell us?
No, with LeBron, but LeBron kept making shots. His quote was, "A gentleman over there decided to talk back with me. It's happened in the past. It usually doesn't work out good for the other team." So not a lot notable about the Hawks here. They were pretty much outclassed through the entire series, as it would happen in a 4-game sweep in which the Cavs won by double digits every game. But yeah, there's another awesome game by LeBron here.
Yeah, we'll move on to 2016. This is Game 6 of the NBA Finals versus the Warriors. LeBron has 41 points on 67.2 true shooting percentage, 8 rebounds, 11 assists, 4 steals, 3 blocks, and only 1 turnover. This is a famous game, of course, because Cleveland won at home 115-101 to tie the series after going down 3-1. The famous, down 3-1 comeback. This was tying the series. This came after a 41-16-7 3-3 game in Golden State. Kyrie Irving also scored 41 in that game. That was the Game 5. And then that was the game without Draymond Green. He got suspended. I forget what the hell he did. Did he hit someone in the nuts again?
Yeah,
I'm sure
it was LeBron. Actually, he hit the nuts.
Oh yeah, right. I just assume he hit somebody in the nuts.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that seems like the obvious Draymond Green suspension thing is that. So yeah, that's when he was. That was the year where he was just hitting everybody in the nuts all the time. People were like, "All right, dude, what are you doing? You have to stop doing that." Yes. He was like, "I don't know what I'm doing." I think it wasn't. He was just like, "I don't know. It just happens." Legs. It's like, no, you can't. You have to stop doing that. Yeah. You have to stop hitting people in the nuts. You cannot keep doing that. But James was the first player to have consecutive 40-point games in the finals since old Shaquille O'Neal in 2000, his former Cavs teammate Shaquille O'Neal, of course. Who can forget?
Who can forget
Shaq Cavs run that we had? So this is obviously a little from the NBA.com game score. The two-time champion had a hand in 27 consecutive points and 35 of 36 during a stretch in the second half and put away the Warriors after they had trimmed a 24-point deficit to 7. James scored 17 in the fourth before checking out to a thunderous ovation in the final minutes as Cleveland fans chanted "Cavs in 7" and "See you Sunday." In this game, Steph Curry also got tossed with 4 minutes and 22 seconds left after he was called for his 6th personal foul. He cursed several times at an official, fired his mouthpiece in front of a row and into the first row and struck a fan. I remember that as well. This was some weird, uncharacteristic unraveling from the Warriors. Yeah, it was certainly a lot of stuff building up with Draymond getting suspended and Steph tossing his mouthpiece into the crowd. So.
Yeah, and I think that actually hit one of the Cavs co-owners, if I remember correctly, and that was also when Steph's wife tweeted about it being rigged, and got a lot of backlash about that. Yeah, that was nuts. That whole thing. That series,
man. That series is incredible. Yeah,
that was incredible. Yeah, I mean that's gonna be. It's going to be hard to top that again. Yeah. In terms of just the amazing things that happened in that series, and obviously we've had 2 of those in recent times with the first Heat Spurs series as well. I mean, we've had 2 of the most amazing basketball series that I can ever recall happening within just a couple of years' time. It's gonna, I'm sure at some point we're gonna get some great stuff like that, but that's pretty remarkable that we've been able to live through that.
Right, and then Game 7 was obviously a boring affair with nothing really important. Oh wait, no, It was like one of the greatest games ever. It was incredible. That's serious.
A lot of missed shots down the stretch, but the excitement intensity was
exactly one of those ones.
Execution not quite as much.
Right. It was kind of a lot of people failing miserably, but it's fine. Like that kind of works pretty well in terms of the context of kind of a final fun game. So that was
sure. Yeah, lots of drama and big moments, obviously.
Right, absolutely.
Yes. So next one is also very recently from May 3rd, 2018. And it is Game 2 against the Raptors in the Eastern Conference second round.
The wounds are still...
Yeah,
they're still tender.
They're still fresh, so I'm not going to dig in too deeply. But I will mention 43 points on 696 true shooting, 8 rebounds, 14 assists, only 1 turnover. And this was the first 40 points, 14 assist playoff game in NBA history. And this was Cleveland's second straight win on the road. It was 128-110. This was coming one game after LeBron had his now famous running one-handed banked in game winner in Game 1, one of the weirdest buzzer beaters in both LeBron's history and in really NBA history. And I think really the thing that stood out to me in this game and really these total playoffs is just the degree of difficulty both of LeBron's shots and passes. I mean, in this game, he was just making fadeaway jumper after fadeaway jumper in the game. And that's obviously, unusual for LeBron. I mean, he's obviously a great offensive player and certainly can make a lot of clutch shots, but obviously you're not going to see that all the time. But he's demonstrated that a lot, both in that and really in his passing of just like threading the needle. I mean, he's always been a great passer, but it just feels like he's even gotten better at that aspect of his game as he's gotten older.
Yeah, and I remember in this series, in this game in particular, I should say, where it felt like he was just like trying shots, like, see, let me try this, or like, let's see, like, and the Raptors were playing good defense. There was just like literally nothing you could do. They knew what it was coming. They knew he was trying a shot, and like, yeah, he just hit everything. And like you said, yeah, the passing was just so incredible in this the Raptors series, and obviously it's fresh in the mind, so we're talking about it as as we had seen it because it's only happened a few weeks ago. But yeah, this was an incredible series, and what I remember as being an incredible game, like one of those ones that you feel like you're not going to get that many more of these left in LeBron's career, but he keeps doing them, so you're not really sure. It's like I'm at a point where I'm just not going to assume that LeBron's done until like he's actually done, because it's just you don't think you would still get these at whatever he is, 35 I think now.
Yeah, no, I think 33.
Or 33,
but he's been around so long.
Right, yeah.
Like
I mean,
older. Right.
God, yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, I remember it's in high school when he's graduated college. I moved on. I've gotten married. It's just crazy what's happened, in my life and his career or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, this is like one of those rare performances that I say rare performances, but they're really not. I mean, sometimes they just happen a lot. But yeah, it was just incredible to watch him just do whatever he wanted on the basketball court. He just was in complete control of the game.
Yeah, and it's just, you wonder how long it will last just because of the age and the stage of his career that he is in. I mean, he's going to be, I think, still a very good player for a long time. Is he going to be this great for, still arguably the greatest player in another couple years? We'll kind of see how that goes, and a lot of will, of course, depend on what situation he ends up being in after this season and so forth. What kind of role he has on that team, whether he stays in Cleveland or whether he joins a super team somewhere else or forms one somewhere else or whatever. But definitely, I think the lesson of this show is, as we've said, I think many times, appreciate LeBron for what we have right now, because it's, like I said, it's among the most amazing basketball that's ever been played in the history of the game.
Yeah.
So the next game is also from 2018, April 18th. It was Game 2 against the Pacers in the first round. 46 points on 774 true shooting, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals. 2 steals, 3 turnovers. But yeah, not slight negative. But he. This was in a 197 win. It came after the Cavs lost Game 1, and this was the first time that LeBron had lost a Game 1 in the first round for the first time in his career. So he had never lost a Game 1 in the first round before this time. And this, I think, was a tougher than expected series for a lot of people. I mean, the Cavs... they had their struggles in the regular season, but they'd had some struggles in previous regular seasons and then kind of ran through the playoffs. And it, of course, has been weird this year because they had a tough time getting past the Pacers, and then really easy time getting past the Raptors, and struggled early against the Celtics. We're in the midst of that series, so we don't know how that will turn out. But so it's just been kind of unexpected in how it's worked out. And in fact, 5 games in this series were decided by 4 points or less. The Pacers won the other 2 games 98 to 80s and 121 to 87. So they destroyed the Cavs in the point differential, but the Cavs won the series by their 4 games. They won by a total of just 14 points. So, this was not the game where LeBron hit his now famous game-winning 3 at the buzzer that evoked his 2009 shot against Orlando. That was Game 5 of the series. We'll get into a little bit more about that there. But from the recap of the game, LeBron scored the game's first 16 points at 29 at halftime, and just basically came on early, and they were able to hold off the Pacers down the stretch. Oladipo missed a 3-pointer that could have tied the game and changed the series, but the Cavs were able to pull it out.
Yeah, we'll move on to our next game here. This is Game 4 of the... I'm trying to remember if I went to this game or what's one game in the series. I don't recall which one it was, but I know LeBron definitely dominated one of these games. It was April 25th, 2010, Game 4 versus the Bulls in the Eastern Conference first round. I think this... I'm looking at this game. I think this was the one I went to. Yeah, that was... It was unique. It was pretty fun. I enjoyed it. I mean, I was a guy who, I was obviously a Bulls fan, but I was kind of there being like, yeah, pretty cool watching LeBron dominate my team. So, and he did dominate, 37 points on 86.4% 86.4 true shooting percentage, 86.4 true shooting, 12 rebounds, 11 assists, 2 steals, only 2 turnovers. LeBron led the Cavs in that game in points, rebounds, and assists, as he has wanted to do many times. And this was a Game 4 win, 121-98. And this is a 5-game sweep, or 5-game gentleman's sweep, I should say. By the Cavaliers in this Eastern Conference first round. This was the Cavs were the 1 seed this time. The Chicago was the scrappy 8 seed Bulls. And this was obviously LeBron's first time owning the Bulls, but would definitely not be the last. We'll get to a few more of those as we go on. But yeah, he made a quick work of the Bulls in many subsequent years, both in Cleveland and in Miami. So this is kind of his first one. But from the game recap here, LeBron had a terrific game with a triple-double, but he really set the tone defensively. This is head coach Mike Brown said. He was terrific for us on the weak side. He was great on the ball. He talked defense the whole game. This is who we are, and this is who we want to be, especially at this time of the year. Joakim Noah, not that impressed. He's a very good player. That's all he said, so that was good. And Noah was awesome in this game. He had 21 and 20, so this was a really good performance from him. But yeah, this was kind of an upstart Bulls team. They would obviously next year, get kind of retooled. Derrick Rose would take the next step, win the MVP. But LeBron would still, defeat them in the playoffs. But yeah, this is kind of a scrappy Bulls team that wasn't quite there yet, but would start getting there. And the LeBron, they were a pretty good looking team for right now. But we'll talk about them this year in a little bit. It's obviously the 2010 Cavaliers. Things will go a little bit different by the end of the year here. And obviously LeBron, the next time he'd be beating the Bulls, he'd be on a different team. But yeah, there's that one, and of course the first time he shows the Bulls that he is the man and that they will never beat him. So, good one. Yeah, I'm looking at this as absolutely the game that I went to. So it's a pretty fun game to go to.
It's interesting that all of these games so far that we've discussed have been LeBron on the Cavs, but this is the first one. His highest ranking here as a member of the Heat is Game 4 versus the Nets in 2014 in the Eastern Conference second round. This is from May 12th. And it's kind of hard to remember now since the Garnett, Paul Pierce, Joe Johnson, Darren Williams Nets era is largely remembered as, a disaster that gutted the team because of so many draft picks being sent out in those trades. But there was actually some fear at the time that the Nets could challenge the Heat. The Nets had swept the season series that year, and they had a really rough start to the season, but they actually did play well for the second half of the season, kind of found something that worked for them. And actually the series, it was only a 5-game series, but the Nets actually kept it fairly close. They did take Game 3. But in Game 4, LeBron came back with another incredible stat line, obviously, 49 points on 757 true shooting, 6 rebounds, 3 steals, only 1 turnover. And from the NBA.com recap, he shot 16 of 24 from the field and dominated the Nets, whether it was operating out of the post, driving to the rim, or pulling up from behind the arc. And I think this game is a real good showcase of LeBron expanding his versatility while in Miami. I mean, he talked about that, and just he was able to be more efficient, be able to develop more of a post game, become a better 3-point shooter, and it felt like he kind of had room to do that since he didn't always have to be the guy counted on to really deliver, make every shot and deliver in every big moment. He could, when he needed to or when he wanted to, step back, and they had Wade and Bosch to take over at certain points as well. So I think that it allows for a situation where you can develop your game in other ways and be more complete by doing that. And LeBron obviously was already an outstanding player, but he just added some key pieces to his game that I think have served him as he's gotten older, and his athleticism isn't quite what it was. Obviously, the first time around in Cleveland, he obviously is still supremely athletic, but he's able to expand his versatility and expand his depth as he's going forward.
Yeah, and if I remember, this is at a time, too, with this Heat team and a few years prior as well. I think 2013 was a year where he was just, crazy efficient, where it wasn't like he had to take 30 shots a game or whatever, like he did in Cleveland. We're talking about a lot of those big-time Cleveland games where he had to do everything, had to be the guy that scored every time, had to, put up every shot or whatever. A lot of the Miami stuff was him able to be a super efficient shooter. He only shoot, 15 times a game or whatever, make 13 of them and then, affect the game in so many other different ways, particularly on defense, where he was just incredible throughout almost the entire Miami tenure. So, yeah, a lot of Miami games don't pop up here, and that's probably by design. He doesn't want to have to score 50 points and do everything in the game, and that's what made Miami so successful, is that they had so many guys that LeBron could sort of take on that role of a guy who could do just a little bit of everything and be great at that, which is what he probably excels at even more than being a dominant scorer. But obviously he's great at being a dominant scorer too. But yeah, so you see the kind of difference there with a lot of Cleveland games, a lot of those early Cleveland games popping up first, and then more recent Cleveland games, coming up obviously now versus Miami, and then even his first tenure his second tenure, the first few years back in Cleveland, where he was able to lean a little bit on Kyrie, lean a little bit more on Kevin Love, and now he's sort of again had to kind of take over that role again. So we're seeing kind of the gaudy big numbers again, where those don't jump out when he's at Miami.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this game was close. The Nets were pretty close in the series. Chris Bosh actually made a tie-breaking three-pointer in the final minute, and then Ray Allen and James were able to clinch the games with the free throws. And Game 5 would be tied as well. Miami would wrap it up with a 96-94. So again, it's kind of they did stick together for another year, I believe, but this was a sad coda to the to the KG Pierce era, and it was another after which we'll talk about in 2010 after LeBron was left Cleveland after not being able to beat the Celtics. He finally was able to kind of own those guys once he made it into Miami, although they certainly gave him a tough time from at times.
Yeah, and this not seem like you said, there is some, if people kind of think it was an absolute disaster. I mean, they won nearly 50 games one year. I think they won 49. They came back and made okay playoff runs, made it to the semis in this year. Yeah, it wasn't a complete disaster. I mean, it's still obviously an unmitigated disaster, but at least there were some highs, and there was a point where it was like, oh, this team might actually do some stuff. And yeah, obviously they did. And they had a big upset, I think, that first year. The Bulls upset them in the playoffs, and they were a pretty good team and looked like they had a case to really make maybe even an Eastern Conference Finals run or whatever. But yeah, it just wasn't a complete and utter disaster. It's just in retrospect it kind of is. But at the time it was okay for a few years, and then it now it's this. Whatever this is. Whatever this is.
So, whatever this is. Yes. So, next we have from June 13th, 2016, Game 5 versus the Warriors in the final. We already discussed it a bit above, but worth restating that LeBron had a 41-16, 7-3-3 game on 6-12 true shooting percentage in a must-win game on the road against a 73-win team. And he'd also managed to goad the Warriors' best defensive player into getting a technical that led to a suspension the previous game. So, master strategy there. And as LeBron and Kyrie Irving both had 41 points, and they became the first teammates to score 40 points in an NBA Finals game, which is pretty good.
Absolutely. Next game we have here is April 29, 2018, very recent here, Game 7 versus the Pacers. We mentioned the series a little bit. LeBron has 45 points in this game, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 4 steals, 4 turnovers, Game 7. And this looks like a game where it looked like he was going to have to play 48 minutes before he cramped up in the third quarter, but the Cavs were able to deliver a big run without him, so that was good. George Hill, Kevin Love, Tristan Thompson all came out. Tristan Thompson in particular, who had really not been doing much at all this playoff series, including not playing all that much, kind of showed up and sort of redefined their season maybe, and maybe kind of saved their season a little bit. They obviously wouldn't have been in the game if it weren't for LeBron's heroics, but and he came back and he was able to hold the Pacers at bay. So they were able to fend off the Pacers in what would have been a complete. I mean, I cannot imagine the takes that would have happened if they lost to the Pacers in the first round here. But yeah, it was definitely a fascinating series. But yeah, the Cavs stepped up and did some good work, and yeah, it was kind of the role players, the guys that hadn't done a whole lot in terms of George Hill, Tristan Thompson, and then obviously Kevin Love, a guy who was relied upon a little bit to kind of make up for LeBron's. He was out for a little bit, make up for what he did, but yeah, LeBron still is a big reason why they even got to this point. And then of course he cramps up and has issues and and he scores 45 points, and 8 rebounds and 7 assists because he's LeBron, so he's pretty good. So that's pretty funny there. But yeah, they step off the Pacers do not lose in the first round and move on to face the Raptors, where they destroy them. And then we're kind of in the midst of the Cavaliers Celtics series right now, so we don't know how that's going to go, but we'll see.
Well, we will see. So May 3rd, 2006, going back to LeBron's first playoff series, a Game 5 against the Wizards in the Eastern Conference first round. This was the Cavs' first playoff appearance since 1998, 4-5 seed here. And the Cavs won this game 121-120. In fact, it was one of 3 games in the series that the Cavs won by only 1 point. The Cavs and Wizards had what I would say was a rivalry, using air quotes with my fingers, but during the mid 2000s, in general, it was pretty one sided, but this definitely, was a competitive series. And LeBron's line in this game: 45 points on 728 true shooting, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 turnovers, but that's only minor negative. Gilbert Arenas also was great in this game and in this series: 44 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 turnovers. And there were lots of big shots in this series. In Game 3, LeBron hit a game winner over Michael Ruffin with 5.7 seconds left. And in this game, he hit another game winner from the baseline with 0.9 seconds left. Not technically a buzzer beater, but it was very close to one, obviously. Game winner there. And then for the Wizards, Game 6, Arenas forced overtime with a 3 from 32 feet with just 2.3 seconds left. And then overtime, Damon Jones hit the series-winning shot with 4.8 seconds left. So some great stuff here. This is kind of something, I remember this series kind of vaguely, but I'd forgotten just how competitive and how tough, and LeBron hitting 2 big game-winning shots. And I feel like, I could be misremembering this, but I feel like this is the same series where LeBron was criticized for, like, instead of taking the shot, he passed like Daniel Marshall, and then Daniel Marshall missed the shot. It may not have been this series, but it was definitely this playoffs or the next playoffs, where it was just like, I don't know. We were so stupid about how we talked about LeBron for a long time. I mean, people still kind of are, but it was really, really bad early on, and he delivered even in clutch moments very early on in his career.
Yeah, and it's always been an issue with me, and it's a big reason why I've been, obviously living in Chicago, particularly. It's even more grating when it's like, Michael Jordan wouldn't have passed the ball, and I'm like, no, I mean. 1993 and 1997. Okay, all right, that's fine. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah, you're right. He took every shot and scored every. Okay, that's fine. Whatever. It was very much at this time. It was like, anytime they would lose a game and maybe he would he needs to assert himself more. He's got 45 points, and that's the best play if you're getting triple teamed. Passing to Daniel Marshall's not always going to make the shot, but maybe he does sometimes. But the thing that I love most about this is you're listing all these guys. Who the hell are these guys? You know what I mean? LeBron is still playing, and you mentioned Michael Ruffin, Daniel Marshall, Gilbert Arenas, Damon, that feels like 40 years ago. And it's and it is a long time ago, but it's just funny how LeBron, his career spans such an ungodly amount of time that those names feel like Michael Ruffin. How I know we're making Curtis Harris's blood boil by just even mentioning Michael Ruffin, but Michael Ruffin was in the league and playing substantial minutes when LeBron was 3 or 4 years into his career already. What are we talking about? He's still going and he's still good. It's just unbelievable how long this guy's career has gone. Michael Ruffin.
Michael Ruffin.
Doesn't it feel like Michael Ruffin played 45 years ago? But
it does. It feels like a long time. Yes, for sure.
Daniel Marshall.
Fun fact that I have to mention as an Ohioan: when the Cavs advanced to play the Pistons in the next round, it was the first time that major professional teams from Michigan and Ohio had met in a postseason series or game since 1957. And the Cavs did take the heavily favored Pistons to a tough 7-game series that they ultimately lost. In fact, they had a 3-2 lead in that series as well. LeBron did play very well in that series despite the loss there. So, but given where he was in his career, it was a loss to a very incredible Pistons team at that point was completely reasonable.
Absolutely, yeah. They were a veteran team as well, so it's it's obviously still a very young LeBron at that point, young kind of a mishmash Cleveland team or whatever. But yeah, to still take them that closely is definitely remarkable, and yeah, it doesn't probably get enough credit. And we should mention this game as well, since we're speaking about the Pistons and we're talking about the early LeBron Cavs. Game 5 of the 2007 Eastern Conference Finals, Cavs win 109-107 in overtime. But the real story is LeBron's historic performance, and you have probably watched this YouTube video if you weren't alive for it, but it is an incredible one. About midway through the fourth quarter, James has 19 points. The Cavs are leading 79-78. It's about 6 minutes left in the game. LeBron then hit a 17-foot jump shot, and then over the next 16 minutes of the game, he would score 29 of Cleveland's next 30 points, including the team's final 25 points on 11 of 13 shooting from the field. He'd force overtime on a driving dunk with 9 seconds remaining, and then finish the game off in double overtime with a driving layup with just 2 seconds left. Unbelievable game. Yeah, if you've never seen this performance, go see it. And Detroit knows that LeBron's scoring on them. You know what I mean? It's not like they were like, oh, well, keep an eye on, Damon Jones in the corner there. They were like, no, we know that LeBron's going to try. It didn't matter. He was just on another level at this point, too. Driving, shooting, it just was unbelievable what he was doing. And what's important about this game, too, Cleveland would go up 3-2 in this series. They would then win Game 6, and like you said, vanquish what happened the prior year. LeBron would reach his first NBA Finals. They would, of course, lose to the Spurs, which, again, was another veteran team, and the Cavs were just not made for it. When Drew Gooden's your second-best player, probably not not meant for an NBA an NBA title, but the final line for LeBron in that game: 48 points, 7 assists, 9 rebounds in over 50 minutes of game. 38.1 game score. It's actually tied for his 12th best game score of all time, which is pretty funny. When you score, 29 to 30 points, including 25 straight, it's only your 12th best game score of all time because you are a good player and your name is LeBron James. So.
Yes, you pretty good, LeBron James. That's a key takeaway from the show. He's not bad.
That's our description for the show. LeBron, pretty good at basketball.
Pretty good.
Joakim Noah, like Joakim Noah's quote. He's a very good basketball player.
I guess we agree with Joakim Noah then. So, yeah, there you go. So LeBron has 5 buzzer beaters in his career. And we've talked about some of them already, but it's worth recapping them. The first was on May 5th, 2018, just recently. The Raptors had staged a huge second half rally in Game 3. They fought from 17 down to tie the score 103-103 with 8 seconds left in regulation. Rather than put the Raptors in a position to keep their season alive, LeBron had the opportunity to create a legendary moment by taking the ball full court, dribbling to the left side of the key, and having a one-handed runner off the glass to give the Cavs a 3-0 lead in that series and completely just eliminate any chance, of course, that the Raptors had of getting back into that series after playing a tough and spirited game. And I think I misspoke earlier in saying that shot came in Game 1 of the series, but actually came in, as we're saying here, Game 3 of that series. So obviously an incredible one. And in terms of the degree of difficulty, probably the toughest one that he has on this list.
Yeah, no, this one, April 25th, 2018, Cavs versus Pacers, Game 5, and this is one we mentioned as well. Indiana fought back late. It was a 95-95 tie, and they had a chance to win. James came up with a huge block on Victor Oladipo. Really fun game here, and Cleveland gained possession of the ball with 3 seconds left. LeBron caught the ball, took 2 dribbles to his left, and nailed a three-pointer from about 45 feet away. So it was something ridiculous. Pretty far away. Wasn't 45 feet, obviously, but very far away. Nailed a three-pointer, and yeah, just gets the win in a huge Game 5, too. Really a transformative Game 5. Had the Pacers won that game, really different series maybe, and then they really have a chance at actually taking the series, but Cavs come and obviously defeat that, and would beat them in 7, as we mentioned a little bit earlier. It's a recent memory. You know this. You remember this game. We don't have to tell you all about this one. Yeah. This isn't history. Happened 2 weeks ago. You're good. Or 2 or 3 weeks ago. You know this.
It's technically history.
It is technically history, but come on. It was 3 weeks ago. You can look it up on your own.
Yes, so another one a little bit further in the past, May 10th, 2015, Cavs versus Bulls. I guess this is the last time that LeBron owned the Bulls, if I'm not mistaken. So, because this was the end of the Thibodeau era. So, Game 4 of the series, Chicago actually was ahead in the series 2-1 and had built a 11-point lead late in the game. But the Cavs rallied. They took the lead for a bit, but then they had seen that lead disappear with less than 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter. Derrick Rose tied the game with 8.4 seconds left on a driving layup. The Cavs had the ball with no timeouts left, and LeBron tried to win the game on a layup from the right wing, but his shot was blocked out of bounds. And there was some issue here. This was the game where David Blatt attempted to call the timeout that didn't exist, and the referee, I believe it was Scott Foster, basically ignored him. And because if they hadn't, then the Cavs would have lost the ball, and the Bulls would have had a shot in that situation, and basically the Cavs would not have been able to win the game.
Right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. And it's obvious too in the replays that he's like very feverishly calling for a timeout, and Foster's just not listening.
And Ty Lue runs out and tries to stop him from doing it. Yeah. So Matthew Dellavedova inbounded the ball to the baseline from James, who popped out in the left corner for a three-pointer that led the Cavs to win the game, tied the series, and they would ultimately vanquish the Bulls from there. And this was also much was made there where LeBron overruled David Blatt on what the play was and decided to call his own number for what was probably a less efficient shot, but he was able to pull it out and to win the game.
Oh, the David Blatt era. Who could forget? Next game here, May 22nd, 2013. Pacers Heat matchup, two of the best teams in the Eastern Conference at that point. Pacers star Paul George did all he could to try and lead Indiana to the win. First sent the game in overtime with a clutch three-pointer of his own, and then nailed 3 free throws in OT to give Indiana a 102-101 lead with 2.2 seconds left. That was more than enough time for James, though. He took an inbound pass from Shane Battier, drove the lane to the left side, and nailed the layup to seal the 103-102 game. The 102 win in game one. And this is an awesome series too. It's kind of a fun little, I don't know if it's lost of time quite yet. Maybe in a few years we'll see, but these Pacers Heat matchups were awesome. Like, there was times where the Pacers legitimately looked like they could possibly upset the Heat. Roy Hibbert's at the top of his game. David West is playing great. Paul George. You got Lance Stevenson blowing in ears. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, because obviously they're going to pop up in a lot of these worst games as well. But yeah, some real fun series here, and I really hope that they don't get lost of time, because they were really, really fun.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun times during that time. Yeah, I hope I'm hopeful we'll get like a good book or documentary or both that capture that Heat era, because that really like is ripe for some deeper exploration and some more, you know, kind of behind the scenes and in depth and, you know, myth making type stuff, because that was some great times. And obviously it's been a little while since it hasn't been quite enough distance yet to have that kind of stuff for it, but you know, I'm excited to delve into that stuff and learn more about that team and that era and be reminded of things, you know, that I saw that you obviously just get lost in time. And obviously those Pacers Heat battles are certainly you know, up there.
Yeah, certainly.
And our last one, already referenced it, but May 22nd, 2009, the Magic versus Cavs, Game 2. This is one of the more memorable shots of LeBron's career. It's definitely one of the top ones on the highlights. That, you know, very distant three-pointer that he took to win the game. Even though the Cavs did not win this series, it still stands up there as one of their more remarkable ones. And actually, the Magic they were down 23 in the game, but they were able to take the lead 96-95. Hideo Turkoglu had a 11-foot jumper with 1 second left on the shot to play. So it left 1 second left, and there was very little time left, obviously. And it was an inbounds pass from Williams, and LeBron basically only could turn his shoulders toward the rim and fire, and he did, and it was dramatic game winner. So exciting stuff.
I remember this one as well, and I forget who the guy, there was, what the hell is his name? I should look it up. There was some terrible Cavs player that immediately ran up to him. What was that dude's name? Oh my God! Here, let me look it up real quick. I know, because I remember like the first person he like now it's like Seti Osman is the guy who always like comes right away and says, "I got to find out who this guy."
Well, they're in position. You know, the worst players need to be the ones who stand out there.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. Sasha Pavlovich was the guy. I remember him like running up immediately, and it's like the famous is like LeBron jumping, and the first person he has to reach is Sasha Pavlovich. Yeah. It's like we can do it. But yeah, Seti Osman's the guy now who's just like right there, ready to do it. Like, yeah, man, like please let me come back next year. Like, I really want to. But I think, you know, to be fair, I think Sasha played a lot that. I mean, I know he didn't like produce all that much, but I think he played a decent amount.
I think he was playing, like, he played a lot in 2007. I think by 2009 he wasn't playing quite as much.
Yeah, but maybe that wasn't him. Maybe I'm getting the wrong guy. Maybe I'm mixing up game winners. But maybe let me.
Yeah.
Oh no, he was still on the team there. No, he was still on the team. All right, it was definitely him. Yeah, it was definitely him.
Okay, all right.
Good, confirmed.
Yes,
confirmed. You guys were all curious, and it was Sasha Pavlovich. So there you go.
Yes. So we wanted to track LeBron's career playoff highs in each category. So I thought that might be fun. In points, we've mentioned both these games, but 49 points in May 12th, 2014 against Brooklyn, May 20th, 2009 against the Magic. Assists his most is 14, which he's done 3 different times, and rebounds is 19 on May 13th, 2010 against Boston. And of course, the was an infamous series for him, but certainly he had a good effort there in that game. 6 steals on May 15th, 2012 against Indiana. 5 blocks May 7th, 2011 against Boston. And his highest game score, as we talked about, May 20th, 2009 against Orlando, the first game we talked about in the series. For some reference, it is the 13th best playoff game score in NBA history. Number 1 is Charles Barkley's 52.6, which happened in the 94 playoffs against Golden State. Most three-pointers was 7. It was April 30th, 2006 against the Wizards. And most minutes was May 5th, 2006 against the Wizards as well. So 53 minutes.
Yeah, a lot of minutes there. All right, let's get to worst games here. So these are the worst games of LeBron's playoff career. This is actually kind of interesting because this week, Not on Calculus, Bo Schwartz Madsen wrote a piece about LeBron's worst playoff games, and they used, obviously some fancy graphs, as Not on Calculus want to do, so it's good stuff there. So check that out. I believe if you just look up LeBron James playoff highs and lows, it'll come up here. So a lot of the same games we reference here, they talk about. But yeah, it's, this is going to be a hot take and surprising to people, but it turns out LeBron has had more good games than bad in the playoffs, so that is You can take that as a fact that you can go to, your water cooler and say, hey, I found out that LeBron's had more good playoff games than bad ones. You know that. Anyway, two famous bad games of James's career that we're going to talk about here. They don't rank out as like his all-time worst, but they're definitely ones that historically and narratively have kind of popped up a little bit. May 11, 2010 versus the Boston Celtics. This is a 32-point loss by the Cavs versus the Celtics. LeBron scores 15 points on only 3 of 14 shooting, has 7 assists, 6 rebounds. His game score was 9.1. It ranked as the 11th worst playoff game score of his career, so not the worst, but not great either. More than anything, though, the loss put LeBron's Cavs down 3-2 in the Eastern semis. This is a team that had won 61 games in the regular season. This was also LeBron's contract year, so tensions were very high. The summer LeBron was on the way here, and the Cavs basically thought that if they didn't win the NBA Finals, that he was probably going to be gone, and they would correct in that assumption because the Cavs, of course, would lose the next game, fail to make even the Eastern Conference Finals, and then he'd move on to Miami and obviously take his talents to South Beach and whatnot, but a quote from the game score as well said his team's down 27 points and a promising season suddenly in peril. LeBron James walked off the floor to a smattering of boos and a row of empty seats. If this was goodbye Cleveland, it wasn't the send-off he imagined. And this is important because had he not come back to Cleveland, this would have been his last game as a Cavalier because this was the last home game here. They lost obviously in Game 6. If they had won Game 6, Game 7 would have been in Cleveland, and that would have been a very tense game as well. But of course they lost in 6, so did not happen. And then LeBron moved on to I guess greener pastures. I don't know. Yeah, I suppose it was for eventually it was, but
yeah, I went to Game 1 of that series, and the Cavs won by 8. It was a fairly they didn't have too much of a hard time. It was a competitive game, but it wasn't like there was no fear at that point that they weren't going to win the series. It just they seemed like clearly the favorites during that time for whatever reason. But Boston creamed them pretty well in Game 2, and then Cleveland won pretty thoroughly in Game 3 to to kind of they were kind of seizing control there, and then Boston just kind of took over from there and won the next 3 games, most of them pretty handily. So especially that Game 5 that is kind of the most infamous one there, just because he seemed like he was very passive. He seemed like he just wasn't
the most
into it, and he apparently had a elbow injury at the time that was limiting him and so forth, and and again, it's more of a bad game by his standards as opposed to a bad game for anybody else. It was like, it wasn't a good game, definitely, but I mean, he was still contributing on a lot of levels. And if you watch it, he definitely, something didn't seem right there. And there was, of course, a lot of people kind of felt like he was quitting on Cleveland, which I don't think is entirely fair, but nevertheless, that was kind of the reputation at the time.
Yeah, no, and I remember that being the game stories is, LeBron's given up on him. And then like in Game 6, he has an incredible game and does everything that he can to have them win, but it's just like they were just,
right.
He
had like 10 turnovers in that game too, but the effort was certainly there.
Sure.
Right. It wasn't his most effective game ever, but he definitely, he was putting everything that it seemed like he was putting everything that he could into it.
This one definitely stood out though. There was something weird in this game that just didn't quite feel right for him. And no The
question.
elbow, it could have been something. It could have been maybe his mortality, awareness of his mortality or something. I don't know what the hell was going on in this game, but it was definitely a weird one.
There's, I think, a common thread in this game and the game that we're going to talk about in a second is that LeBron has this weird thing where he does seem to get very passive and very tentative in certain situations where maybe it's something where he's so smart about basketball and just he knows almost everything that he's famous for his memory, he's famous for like knowing everybody's plays. He has this his vision is able to kind of like see what guys are doing and what kind of everything that's going on, and if there's something that he can't figure out, it just seems to like really rattle him. A certain thing. It doesn't happen that often, obviously, but obviously it's happened in 2 very big situations in his career that have for better or worse, not defined him because obviously he's come through in so many great situations and has all these things, but have kept have been ammunition for his critics that don't want to see him as being as great as he has been in his career.
Yeah, and this is another game that you mentioned here, June 7th, 2011 versus the Mavericks. This is in the NBA Finals. Heat were up in the series 2-1. James in this game scored only 8 points on 3 of 11 shooting. He added 7 assists and 9 rebounds. Like we said, even when he's bad, it's still pretty good. But interesting, this was the first time in the 2011 playoffs that LeBron failed to score double figures. And for more fun facts, this is one of only 2 times in his career, and this is including this year and including, today, that LeBron has failed to score in double figures, the other being May 28th, 2014 versus Indiana. We'll get to that one here in a little bit. Overall, this snapped a 433 consecutive double-figure scoring game, both regular season and postseason. So this was definitely an uncharacteristically low-scoring game for LeBron. Made only 3 of 11 shots, as we mentioned. He made a tip-in during the first quarter, then a 13-foot jumper and a breakaway dunk in the third, and he failed to score in the fourth, and he took only 1 shot while playing 12 minutes. So like you said, it seems like one of those weird, sort of oddly passive games that he has. Overall, James, he had a 5.9 game score in this game. It's the 5th worst of his career. And moreover, the loss was the first of 3 in a row as Miami lost the NBA Finals to the Dallas Mavericks, of course, the first year of the Big Three Miami. James averaged only 19 points for the remaining 2 games, but definitely wasn't his usual self because the rest of the playoffs he averaged 25.1 points per game, 8.5 rebounds per game, and 5.6 assists per game. And that was in the previous 17 games, that playoff series. So yeah, it was like a weird thing where he kind of, I don't know, yeah, it's one of those weird things like he just kind of is like, damn, Dallas has us, so whatever. Like, I'm just gonna, yeah. But, he averages 19 points, not bad, but like, when you're averaging 25, it definitely was uncharacteristic, and I think it does also prove that teams go out of their way to stop LeBron. And this was a big thing in Miami, is where they. And this first year in Miami, too, there was kind of an uncertainty of, like, who's going to take the big shots, who's going to take this shot. The next years, everybody kind of realized that LeBron's probably the best guy, and he should just kind of do most of the stuff. And Wade and Bosh then kind of became, not necessarily secondary pieces, but definitely the 1B and 1C to LeBron's definite 1A, where as this, It was like a very weird, like, okay, LeBron, Wade's turn, LeBron's turn, sometimes Bosh gets his turn or whatnot. And yeah, it was just like they hadn't quite figured out exactly the formula, and hadn't quite figured out the team, too, because if you remember, this Miami team was basically just like, random ass, old veterans. And it was before they had really kind of built a nice team around the Big Three and, guys like a Shane Battier and whatnot, who are all really good contributors. But yeah, it's an interesting game. Yeah, and this one in particular, only one of 2 games where he scores under double figure or under double figures in his entire career, even to this point. So it's pretty nuts that just never happens. And he had 9, so he's really close, but it just didn't quite get there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and he. Yeah, as you talked about, like Miami at that point, I mean, they obviously had great talent, but it was not a great fit, and they hadn't figured out the style they really wanted to play either that was going to kind of maximize everything, and they would figure that out quickly. But yeah, LeBron, talked about after the Toronto series this year of, Dwayne Casey was, the top defensive assistant for the Mavs that year, and talked about how, like, he didn't play well in that series, that Dwayne Casey, designed some great defensive schemes that, really took him out of the game. And, of course, they had the Mavericks had Tyson Chandler there protecting the rim. They had some pretty good guys to defend LeBron, like Marion and such. So they had good personnel to do it. But LeBron kind of credited that for as being a turning point for him to kind of like need to be more versatile and need to be able to do more things, so he was more difficult to stop, and that obviously led to what we talked about before with adding the versatility and adding more variance in his career, and being able to score from the post and being able to shoot better from outside, being more efficient, and all that kind of thing. So that was a big lesson for his career, and he hasn't really had, I mean, obviously he's had bad games since then, but he's not had the same kind of like seemingly fail like in the big moment. Like every time the big moment has come. Now, his team hasn't always won, obviously, but I feel like there's never really been a situation since then where it doesn't feel like LeBron, didn't deliver like he should have, is in quotes there, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so other games that were bad. Getting back to Boston, 4 of LeBron's 10 worst playoff game scores came against Boston. There, his nemesis. The worst of all, though, May 6th, 2008 versus Boston, Game 1 of the Eastern Conference semifinals in 2008. Of course, LeBron has a negative 0.7 game score, which is actually the worst ever for both his playoff and regular season. The regular season worst was a random negative 0.1 versus the Warriors in January of 2006. So just a random game here. Boston's stifling defense held LeBron to only 12 points. I said only. Obviously 12 points is still pretty damn good. 2 of 18 shooting, though, 0 of 6 from 3, 10 turnovers, and it's actually pretty remarkable how close LeBron comes to a triple-double in this game. It's like his worst playoff game, as I said, like an unquestioned worst playoff game. 12 points, 9 assists, 9 rebounds. Like, you know what I mean? Like, on its face, if you look at, not the shots and the turnovers and whatnot, like a near triple-double in your worst game is definitely not too bad here. But LeBron after the game says, I missed a lot of shots I know I can make. I missed layups. Those layups I've made my entire life. So he's definitely dejected afterwards. Worst of all, Cleveland lost the opening game of this series 76-72. That's a gross final score there. But Cavs coach Mike Brown says he had a tough time and he's entitled to it. Knowing him, he will definitely bounce back in game 2. And yes and no. LeBron scoring was better in game 2. He got 21 points, but still 6 of 24 shooting with 7 turnovers. Cavaliers dropped game 2 as well. LeBron would eventually get back on track later in the series, scoring 35, 32, and 45 in the final 3 games of the series. Ultimately, though, Cleveland would fall in the semifinals, and Boston was on their way to an NBA championship. This was the first year, of course, of the big 3, Garnett, Allen, and Pierce. Cavaliers come back strong the following season, winning 66 games, and then obviously the Hero Turkoglu thing happened, and then the history, as we know. Then the next year, Boston happened again, and then they took us down to South Beach. But this is his worst overall game, negative 0.7 game score against the Warriors. Still 12 points, 9 assists, and 9 rebounds, though, so not bad.
Yeah, not too bad. So, some other clunkers. May 28th, 2014, against Indiana. This was Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals. The Pacers were desperate to keep their season alive at this point, and they played one of the most fantastic games that they had ever played, and while forcing LeBron into one of his worst. LeBron battled foul trouble all night, which he's pretty rare in his career. He doesn't generally deal with a lot of foul trouble, whether it's just he's good at avoiding fouls or the refs call it that way, either way. And yeah, he had a playoff career low of 7 points. Is that do you know if that's a career regular season low as well? Or
let me find that. Let me find out. Yeah, let me do a quick little search while we're here, because I imagine that's definitely got to be pretty up there for sure. Let's see.
LeBron only had 2 rebounds and 4 assists in the game, and yet LeBron and the Heat lost. They were unable to close out the Pacers, forcing the series to a Game 6. It was a pretty rare stumble for the Heat in an elimination game in the Big 3 era. 3 other times the Heat lost Game 1 on the road, but all 3 times they won the next 4 games to close out the series. This game is also sort of famous for Lance Stevenson being involved. This was the game where he attempted to enter the Heat's huddle, and later in the game he blew in LeBron's ear. LeBron's quote from it was, "I'm just here to play basketball, man. All the extracurricular activities I don't really get into. Just trying to win. We need one more win to get to the finals. That's my only concern. All the extra stuff, whatever Lance wants to do, I don't really care about that." And LeBron would do okay. Respond in Game 6, he would score 25 points, 8 of 12 shooting, and Miami would make the finals for the 4th straight season. Things would not go so well in the finals, as they would lose to the Spurs, and LeBron would take his talents to Lake Erie, because so not quite as exciting as South Beach.
No.
It's gone well for him in Cleveland.
I've never been. You have, obviously, so you can.
Right. I've been. I mean, it's a nice enough lake, but it's not quite South Beach. I don't mean to betray Ohio on that, but it's the truth.
Yeah. As far as playoff or regular season career lows, his worst ever is versus Houston. He had 3 points. This is only in 17 minutes, so I don't recall what happened in 2004. Maybe he got hurt or twisted an ankle or something like that. He only took 5 shots, and he missed all 5 shots that he took. So I'd imagine there's something there, because he never really plays, only 17 minutes.
It was a rookie, maybe just I have no very early on. Yeah,
exactly. Other ones, he scores 4 against the Clippers in 2003. You're going to notice a theme here. Then 6 2003 against Pistons, 7 2003 against Denver. And these are really early. I mean, these are November games. You know what I mean? So this is still Cleveland hasn't decided. Oh, we should just give the ball to LeBron every single game and let him do everything.
They haven't traded Ricky Davis.
Right. Rick's still getting his at this point, unfortunately.
Yeah, so.
And then 2007, a rare one against Milwaukee as well. He scores only 8 points in 43 minutes. But otherwise, that's it. I mean, in terms of double-figure games or under double-figure games, got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Only 8 his entire career under double figures, and one of them is definitely a game where he got hurt, and the others are his rookie years. So incredible. So 7 of the other ones are the first month of his rookie year. That's incredible.
Okay.
So that's
so
it's basically just Ricky Davis taking shots that he doesn't need to be taking, because LeBron should be taking them. So that's about it. So otherwise, if you get Ricky Davis out of the equation, LeBron scores double figures, pretty much guaranteed. Every single game.
So worth noting that LeBron has only fouled out twice in his playoff career. They both were losses: June 3rd, 2012 against Boston, and May 28th, 2013 against Indiana. In 2012 against Boston, LeBron still had 29 points, 12-15 shooting, and Mikael Pietrus drew the critical foul on LeBron. I forgot that he played for the Celtics at that point, but. And also, interestingly, Paul Pierce fouled out of the game. By this point, he'd only done that 5 times in 11 games in his career. This was a really tough series for Miami against a Boston team that definitely was aging and was dealing with injuries. But Miami would eventually win the series and win the NBA title against Oklahoma City. But it would take 7 games to do so against Boston. I know that LeBron had one of it. We didn't mention it, but LeBron had one of his most incredible games in his career in this series as well, especially considering the circumstance of being down 3-2 in that series, and the disappointment that would have been felt had they lost that series, and the recriminations about whether this Heat thing was working out at that point, certainly would have been felt.
Absolutely. Next game that he falls out is against Indiana in 2013, as we mentioned. Like the Boston game, LeBron scored pretty well and played pretty well. He had 24 points on 8 of 18 shooting. But fouled out in a loss. Similarly, this is game 4 of the... So, kind of remember, so we talked about the game before against Boston. Here are the similarities here. So this was game 4 of the Eastern Conference semifinals. It was a game that allowed the team to tie the series at 2 in a series that LeBron's Heat would eventually win in 7 games. So it's exactly the same scenario as the year prior, and all those things, all you do is swap out Boston with Indiana. But James was called for a technical foul in the first quarter, and he had 4 fouls over the final 12 minutes of the game. The last was an offensive foul. After walking from one end of the court to the Miami bench, James then sat disbelievingly on the media table and spent the final 56 seconds mumbling to the officials. And LeBron's quote was, "It was a couple fouls that I didn't feel like were fouls, personal fouls I made, but that's how the game goes sometimes." So very rare foul-outs there by LeBron. And that's kind of it for like his really terrible games. Like there's, we'd really be nitpicking if we're like, this game he had like a 15 game score. That really stunk, right? Like there's not really many others. So.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty incredible. Obviously, that there are so limited number of games where he's where you can say like, oh yeah, he was bad in that game. I mean that's just like almost that's almost hard to believe.
Yeah, like just to give you an idea, his 6th worst game score here is 6.7. He scores 26 points, has 9 rebounds and 2 assists. Like it's you're really yeah. I mean in terms of games under 10 game scores, there's only 12 of those under 10 game scores. So that's like even his worst games he's still contributing pretty well. And then we mentioned the 2 negative games that he has, the negative 0.7 and then negative 0, and then those are the only 2 negative game scores, and that's it. I mean that's right. You're really, otherwise you're just kind of nitpicking if you're picking games that he was 8 of 23 like it's a 24 points and 10 assists. It's like, all right, yeah, I mean I guess that's bad, but
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, the most recent bad one was in the current series against Boston on May 13th, 2018, where he was it was 15 points, 7 rebounds, 9 assists. There were 7 turnovers, so that was high, and only 5 of 16 shooting. So obviously limited game there, but that's still contributing on a lot of levels, despite the despite it obviously being on the lower end of LeBron's games in his career.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of give you an idea where his numbers rank compared to other all-time greats. Criteria here, we're doing that 50-plus playoff games because obviously you don't want to just, do 5 playoff games because some random dude might show up here. So 50-plus playoff games, that feels like you're probably a pretty great player if that's going to happen here. And yeah, as far as the overall playoff numbers, just to kind of give you an idea, this is as of this recording here, 230 games recording this, as we mentioned on Sunday, the 20th, May 20th. 230 games, 49 win shares, averages of 28.7 points per game, 8.9 rebounds per game, and 7 assists per game. Michael Jordan has the next closest win share total at 39.8 over 179 games. So obviously far fewer games, but pretty close in terms of win shares, about 10 down in win shares. Jordan's averages 33.4 points per game, 6.4 rebounds per game, and 5.7 assists per game. I just get an idea here. Only Derek Fisher, Tim Duncan, Robert Horry, and Kareem have more total playoff games than LeBron, who obviously he has the added benefit of the 7-game series in the first round, but still it's still very impressive. And he's 29 games away from Fisher, so he almost inevitably become the all-time leader. Like I think it's probably understood that LeBron will probably have 29 more playoff games in his career unless anything awful happens in the next little while. But he almost inevitably will become the all-time leader in playoff games. And after LeBron and Jordan, Duncan is 3rd in total win shares at 37.8. So his averages, Tim Duncan's averages, to kind of give you an idea, 20.6 points per game and 11.4 rebounds per game. Kareem, over 237 playoff games, his averages is 24.3 points per game and 10.5 rebounds per game. And of course, those numbers are pretty. I mean, if you look at his first half of his career, I'm sure those numbers are way more gigantic. But they'll some of those later Laker playoffs where he was just kind of I want to say a role player because obviously still played an important part of the game, but his scoring figures weren't quite as gaudy as high, so I'm sure that kind of dragged it down a little bit here. But I just kind of give you an idea in terms of where he ranks in terms of those different stats. Only Jordan, Jerry West, and Kevin Durant have higher scoring averages than LeBron. And LeBron has more assists per game and more rebounds per game than every single one of those guys as well. So, those three score a little bit more than him, but LeBron definitely has more assists and rebounds per game than those. And just to give you an idea, I thought was fascinating too. The only guys with higher assists per game than LeBron in all-time playoff games are Magic Johnson, John Stockton, Rajon Rondo, Chris Paul, Oscar Robertson, Isaiah Thomas, Kevin Johnson, Steve Nash, Bob Cousy, Jason Kidd, and Russell Westbrook. And yeah, that's that's a pretty, to be among that list is definitely, those guys are all, a few of them, obviously Russell Westbrook is a big time scorer, and a few other guys are pretty good at scoring, but a lot of those guys are known as some of the elite point guards of all time, and LeBron's right up there with them, and he's also just, an elite scorer, an elite rebounder, and all that sort of stuff. So it's just crazy. LeBron good, and very good in the playoffs as well. Just unbelievable output playoff historically for him.
Yeah, we agree with Joe Kim, absolutely. Yeah, he's very good. So great stuff, Rich. This was a lot of fun. Like I said, delving into some things that we remembered, but some things I definitely hadn't thought about in a while. So it was good to check some of that out. I might revisit that Wizards Cavs series from 2006. So at least see some of those game winners and some excitement there. I don't know if the style of basketball will be my favorite, but that's okay. It's I think the excitement there will match up. Plus, getting some prime Gilbert Arenas, he was a fun player to watch.
Oh yeah, he was awesome. Yeah, he's obviously been lost to time, for better for
worse. He wasn't very good, but he was pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was fun to watch him. More than anything, it was just fun because he definitely represents a different era. Kind of the late Gunner era, and he definitely works well. And that's a fun team too. The Wizards had a bunch. As long as they're not wearing those hideous gold uniforms, I'll watch the game. But I'm not watching anywhere they're wearing the gold. I refuse to do it.
I can respect and understand that.
Yeah, so. That's for sure. All right. This is fun. This is really good. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone for checking us out. You can find us at the Step Back at fansided.com. We are on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Play, pretty much anywhere where you listen to podcasts. If you want to give us a rating and review on your favorite podcast player, we would greatly appreciate it. It helps other people find the show, and more importantly, it satisfies our egos, which are very fragile. Mm-hmm, so positive reviews are appreciated. And you can find us on Twitter and Facebook at Over and Back NBA in both places. So thanks for listening, and we're back again soon.